Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss Labour's launch of what it thinks are the 6 main promises with which they can target key swing voters. They've described it as the first steps for change. So what are they, and are they better targeted at least than similar efforts in the past? So Labour have been launching these 6 policy promises today as the initial steps of a much larger offer. They've pointed out that introducing the minimum wage, for example, wasn't on their 1997 pledge card, but they still did it and did it really quickly, emphasising the fact that, what they're planning on doing is not just these 6 things. Their manifesto is going to contain a lot of policy promises. These are just the 6 they're going to focus on for their campaign. But of course, they've been selected as the ones most likely to win over key target voters. Labour will have spent a lot of time testing various lines out in focus groups and hopefully wider polls as well. Remember, when a party launches policies in this format, it doesn't mean that they're the policies which are the most important or will need the greatest resources. It's purely a political tool. They are the policies which the party's research has determined work best on swing voters in their target areas. That's all there is to it. Launching it in Essex is interesting as well. It's a very Tory area, but it's also one where Labour are hoping to make gains, especially as Reform UK will be especially good in places like this at nibbling away at Conservative votes. But just the general concept of launching a major part of the general election campaign, not in a Labour stronghold, which would make more sense, but a Tory stronghold, that is a very in-your-face challenge to the Conservatives. This is ours now. But anyway, what about the policy promises themselves? The first is to deliver economic stability. I actually think this is a really good way of phrasing it as well. Obviously, there's always going to be something about the economy because it's like the top issue for most voters in every election. In 1997, Labour promised not to raise income tax and to cut VAT on heating. Back then, the economy was not in the ruinous state it is now. So Labour were never going to make headway pretending it needed CPR. But it's different now. Rishi Sunak likes to claim that he's stabilised our economy after the Liz Truss period. It's not always the best selling point because Liz Truss is also still Tory. But with Labour saying that they will stabilise the economy, not simply boost it, but stabilise it, that's their word, they're pointing out, actually, Sunak hasn't stabilised anything. The economy is still in freefall. We still need to fix that. A year into his premiership, he took us into recession. The cost of living is still biting very hard. We're having to spend more on things we should not. For example, people who can are being forced to pay for private consultations, even treatment for healthcare with doctors and dentists because the NHS has been hollowed out. People in parts of the south of England are having to boil their water because of waterborne diseases. No thought given to those whose household budgets are too tight for extra expenses like that. What about people who can't afford to be boiling their water all day? With this promise, Labour are clearly setting themselves up to say, no, Sunak, you didn't stabilise the economy. It's still all over the place. We're the ones who are actually going to have to sort it out. The second one is cutting NHS waiting times. Complete no-brainer. Also a mirror of one of the 1997 promises. This time around, Labour can bandy that Financial Times graph, which shows how waiting lists went up under Thatcher and Major, then down again under Blair and Brown, and then back up again with Cameron and the clowns who followed him. Waiting lists are the most visible sign of a failing NHS, and it will have taken no thinking whatsoever for Labour to put that in there. And of course, they now have easy to read data to back up their credentials for sorting it out. The next is launching a border security command, a play to those concerned about the very visible sign of the Tories' asylum policy failures. I talked about this in a bit more detail recently, but another obvious one, in fact, one of the oddest things about this launch is that there are 6 parts to it, because political promises usually come in 5s. It would appear that the others have been developing over time and they've put this one in as the 6th to take, even though it's the 3rd, but it's the 6th one to be added, to take advantage of Sunak's complete failure on the matter. Because no matter what happens now with the Rwanda plan, the Tories have got no credible way of being able to claim that they've got a handle on border security. No way at all. The 4th is setting up Great British Energy. This is not only supposed to kickstart the process of moving energy back into public ownership, but the umbrella for Labour's version of, part of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. It's there to spearhead growth in green technology in the UK and shift jobs from high to low carbon industries. also being presented as a way of reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and therefore parts of the world which will not always be able to supply them reliably. Labour are pushing heavily the idea that being reliant on fossil fuels apart from anything else helps Putin. The fifth is tackling antisocial behaviour, a favourite for large numbers of ordinary non-partisan voters. There's always something that attracts these sort of voters in any effective list of policy promises. In 1997, it was tackling persistent young offenders, which speaks to the same sort of people about the same sort of issues. Finally, recruiting 6,500 more teachers. This will be specifically for England, of course. Education devolved elsewhere. Again, in 1997, there was an education pledge from Labour as well. In that case, it was cutting class sizes. This is sort of the same thing. How do you cut class sizes? More teachers. So it's the same thing worded differently. And I think the emphasis on staffing this time is probably because the cuts have been so savage with the current Conservative government that it will be very visible to voters who are also parents of school-age kids that the number of staff is not enough. So Labour have set their stall out. Several are basically the same as in 1997, which I could say is an indicator of the sort of problems Conservative governments always create, but also possibly the sort of issues which voters consistently prioritise. But Labour have now set out the policies they think will work best on the voters they're targeting. It will be interesting to see if the Conservatives dare come up with their own version. Because I can see it. If they try to launch something similar, which surely they will at some point, doesn't that just invite Labour to go, oh, what about your last promises? Have you stopped the boats yet? Why are the waiting lists higher? Didn't you say they'd be lower? And the Conservatives will also have to go into overdrive undermining these policies from Labour. Because now that Starmer's launched them, they're going to become Labour's drumbeat all the way until the election. That's it now. Every time a Labour MP is set on an interview doing anything, they're going to be trying to get at least one of these things out there. These are the messages that they're pushing above all others. These are what they think are their most effective vote-winning policies. And they will be right. You know, a party that's so far ahead of the polls does not make fundamental errors with data analysis. So the Tories are going to have to make sure that Labour can't get these messages to take hold now. Otherwise, not only will it solidify Labour's place in the polls, it invites voters to ask what the Tories are going to do that's better. You know, I've noticed a few Tories trying to claim that Starmer won't keep these promises, which is a little bit tragic for two reasons. First, it means that they're unable to argue against the policies themselves. They're looking at them going, oh yeah, they'll be popular, bugger. Oh, he just won't do them. They recognise they're popular, and so they have to cast doubt on Labour's intention to deliver. But the second thing is, the Tories have a proven track record of not delivering what they promise. So they're going to try and claim that Starmer won't keep these pledges, but it's a bit like, but they are proven to not have kept their own. Where are these new hospitals then? Oh, they're not there? How interesting. What's happened to the boats? Oh, the boat's still there? Okay, how interesting. NHS waiting lists. Oh, they're higher. NHS waiting lists are higher. That's interesting. You know, if you look at the even Rishi Sunak personally, never mind the Tories in general, Rishi Sunak's personal 2023 pledges, apart from inflation, which he had nothing to do with, they all failed. So the Conservatives are going to have to do better. Or are they? I suppose it depends on how seriously you take something like this. People will inevitably compare these promises with 1997 Labour card. I've just done so because it became so iconic. And pretty much every time Labour have done something similar. But how important was that 1997 promise card, really? It's hard to say because the card in 1987 was introduced during the general election campaign itself. The election had been called and the polls narrowed during that time. So did it work? Was it beneficial? It's hard to say because the polls were narrowing. I mean, maybe they'd have narrowed more without it. We don't know. There's no data. Labour have now launched their equivalent before the general election has even been called. It might be still 8 months away. So what can we read into this? That Labour don't think they need to keep their powder dry on the main appeals anymore? That these 6 policies will definitely be the best to appeal to swing voters, no matter when the election is, whether the election's in July now or next January? Or do we speculate that Labour just felt the need to begin early in order to maximise the time they have to publicise them, so that Rishi Sunak's "Oh, Labour have got no plan" can just be like, yeah, mate, funny. But whatever the reason for going so early with this, and this is potentially very early, Labour are presumably confident that the benefits of getting this message out to the people outweighs the downside of giving the Tories a target to aim for basically half a year. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.